Alderman Hallman? Here. Alderman Froen?
We have a quorum. Is there anyone who wants to speak? We have anybody for public comment? Madam Clerk, do we have anyone for this? Cards. No. Okay, alrighty. Well, then we're going to go ahead and move forward with the presentation on the comprehensive fee study. And Mr. City Manager David Hales, did you want to have any preparatory comments or?
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor. Mayor and Council, as you know, this comprehensive fee study has been talked about for several years. I think anytime you embark on such a study, and I'm not sure if the city has ever had such a study done, but in the cities where we've undertaken such an exercise before, there's not only a lot of work up front in working with the consultant to complete the study, but sometimes there's even more work going forward in implementation. As you're going to hear tonight, I think there's some interesting findings, but it is also kind of a significant change for the city because as the next steps are talked about, this particular study and its implications, it's what would be presented in the future is going to entail some policy decisions of cost reimbursement policies for a myriad of services that we provide that lend themselves to having the cost of those services, both direct and indirect, paid for by fees and service charges. We're very fortunate tonight to have two gentlemen from Fiscal Choice Consulting to make this presentation. They were here today even providing additional training to a couple of members of our finance staff. We will be charging the finance department with the primary responsibility to help keep these, to implement, execute these recommendations and work with the various departments as we continue to always keep fairly current both direct and indirect costs associated with the many fees that the city issues now or may yet entertain in the future. With that, I'd like to turn to Bruce Cowens to begin the presentation. He'll also acknowledge his partner and associate who's here tonight as well. Mr. Cowens.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Mr. Manager. And this is my partner, Jerry Wolf, who also conducted part of the study. The plan for this evening is to use not more than 15 minutes in my running through a slide deck to present to you how we did the study and what we found, and then to leave the second half of the session for unstructured question and answer. Without further ado then, let me begin. What is the point of having a fee? We're selling a service. That's really what it is. If you are a taxpayer, you are entitled to certain services as a matter of course, but there's no direct link between the amount of taxes you pay and the level of service that you personally will obtain. That doesn't hold for a user fee. For a user fee, we're saying you can have all you want, but you have to pay for it. And so the open question is exactly what Bloomington has asked. How does what we're charging compare to what it costs us to deliver the services? I have heard a lot of people say, I'm already a taxpayer, why should I have to pay any fees? Well, we're all federal taxpayers, but we have to buy stamps, we have to pay for passports, et cetera. And frankly, this is just part of the bundle of how we pay for government, which is some of it you pay in taxes and some of it you pay in fees. The fees then are a purchase of service. Now, bundled under what you might think of as fees are a group of different types of charges. Fees are purchases of service, and by a ruling of Illinois Court of Appeals, you're not supposed to make a profit on inspection or regulatory services. Fines are behavioral incentives. You do not have to link those to cost. Somebody's not doing what you want them to do, you may fine them. Licenses give you permission to do business here, but it's not really a fee. And we're saying who's in our community, what do we know about them, who would we contact in case of an emergency, et cetera. Are they the kind of people we want here? Taxes are more generalized exactions of wealth. You earn more, you pay more income tax; shop more, you pay more sales tax, all of which entitles you to services such as citizens get, but it doesn't link to any specific amount of service. You don't get your own lane to drive in. People often ask me, what do we do if the budget's tight? And it boils down to two things: earn more or spend less. On the earn side, taxes are very unpopular as a go-to source to deal with a tight budget. It's not impossible, but it's unpopular. Fees are what we're talking about tonight, so we'll hold that. The other side of things would be to reduce expense. If your budget's not balanced, you could say, well, let's just find some efficiencies. And you can, but fundamentally what that amounts to is balancing the budget by dialing back how fast you serve people, because that's what happens when you have less money. You asked for and received two deliverable documents. One is a cost allocation plan, and one is the fee study of the individual offices. What is a cost allocation plan? It's a technical term. You can think of the city as having two basic functions. There are people that serve citizens directly, and there are people that serve the people that serve the citizens directly. And the latter category would be administrative services such as HR and finance and facilities management. And so we have undertaken a cost allocation plan that's an analysis of these central overhead costs and trace them out to the departments and funds that they benefit so that we can get specific about what does it really cost the city to support offices when that expense is not found entirely in their own budget. In the fee study, fundamentally what we do is we start with the budget of the department, but we're drilling down not to what does it cost to run the organization, but what does it cost to do X and Y and Z in each office. So you would never budget that way, heaven forbid. That would be overwhelming, but for the purposes of this study, you need to drill down from what does it cost to run the department to what does it cost to do each of the things that the department does. The cost allocation plan has some other potential uses. It will show you where you are at in terms of charging other funds, in terms of charging intergovernmental agreements, etc. We used it also here to find the amount of administrative cost that goes into supporting each fee service. We have provided the files to finance and the training. Our expectation is that you will update these models yourselves, but that you'll call for tech support from time to time, and we will coach your staff through the process of updating this. I have up now a summary of the findings, and we're still packaging the material for Park and Rec and bring that to you at a future point. But here, what this shows, and I think this is very important, is that the city is using tax dollars to the tune of $1.4 million a year to support fee services. That doesn't mean that every fee is undercharged. It's not. But collectively, it is the finding of this study that while a fee may be a purchase of service, the price charged is less than the cost of the delivered service. And the difference is coming from tax dollars. So you see the line item detail in front of you. A lot of that, of course, is clustered around building and development services. We'll treat each individual department here or office one by one. But the big picture is that the city is using tax dollars to the tune of $1.4 million to support these operations. Okay, let us begin with community development, building safety. I wish I had a nickel for every time somebody said, we can't touch these fees because we will discourage development in our city. And if you don't worry about that, and I don't know why you wouldn't worry about that, I think it's very important. Nobody means to be unfair here. But city data show that last year, the city permitted construction projects worth about $95 million. And in selling the permitting services, to review the plans to make sure that things are safe according to building code, to make sure that things are built according to plans, that neighbor questions about construction get answered, The city came up about $1 million short in the permit prices for those projects. There is a rather elaborate fee structure right now with tiers of if your value of your project is between X and Y or Y and Z, et cetera. The city does not have detail on what it costs to work within each of those bands. We did explore that. We tried to get that data. It was not possible, but we are highly confident from the numbers that you are, in fact, only recovering a small percentage of the cost of the work that you do for development. That is 38. You're getting 38%. Planning. The big thing that stuck out here is a planning commission case. This is almost an administrative law type of proceeding. It invokes hearings and transcripts and additional hearings. And at the rate that you are currently charging, you are recovering $8.33 an hour for your staff effort on that. It is woefully short of the cost of breaking even on a planning case. We will look at some comparative data from other cities, and we will find that while the city's charge, Bloomington's charge of $125 is maybe half of what the peers charge, and nobody's coming close. I will tell you from personal experience that the cost of your cases is not out of line. That's what it costs to do it. So you have a decision in front of you, and I think you should think of all of these user fees this way. Cost is a fact. That's what it really takes to do the work. Price is a policy choice. I can look at the over-under numbers by department, and I cannot detect in there a conscious policy over how much of the cost of these activities you intend to recover from fees. It appears to me that it's just kind of evolved 1 year at a time, one department at a time, one fee at a time. And what you will have in front of you as a result of this study is a discussion over whether the way things are going are the way that you want them to go. And whatever decision you make, I think I would respect, but I give you a lot of credit for asking the question. City clerk fee services are actually operating at a profit. I think it might be fair to say that some of the charges in this office, in city clerk's office, trend more towards what I would call a license than a fee. You want to do business here, you need to let us know who you are. We need to check out, and that's a common policy. But city clerk would be the one exception to the rule. That one's actually generating more revenue than it costs to provide the services. The fire department is under-recovering by about 3%. It has a policy of increasing fees 3% annually. We didn't find it to be uniformly off by 3% activity by activity, but in the aggregate, the policy of a 3% fee increase, I think the study shows that that's a sound policy. You're on the right course on that one. You are doing relatively well on ambulance billings. Typically, I'd expect a 40% cost recovery. You're getting 45. That's good. That's a good thing. You have some ambulance standby costs for sporting events, and that's high school and college, and it's a policy decision whether to ask them to pay a little more. What they're paying right now does not break even. The police department sells a number of services. Police costs are in two bundles. Some of them are support costs to activities where the fee is paid over in the city clerk's office. So we've analyzed some of the police costs, matched that over in the city clerk, et cetera. But what you see on the screen in front of you right now is the summary of police-only costs. You can see two columns in the middle, cost to build services and cost to build services paid. They're $1 million different. In many cases, these are activities that the state mandates not only that you do, but how much you can charge. Your ability to collect fully on that is not great. There is some revenue potential in police. Public Works is as close to a break-even operation as you can see when you're within $362. Break even on a department, we declare victory. He asked me, how do you think we're doing? I'm like, Jim, you can't park that thing any closer to perfect. Okay. Part of the exercise was not just a study of the cost of the work, but a comparison to what other cities charge, and that's in a handout to you. I don't have that to put up on the screen because the number of items on the page is just too many to be visible on a screen, so that's why that's a handout. But as long as you recognize that price and cost don't mean the same thing, it would be useful in looking at your costs and deciding how much to recover to see how you compare to other cities. Nobody wants to wake up and read in the panagraph, City Council raises fees way out of line. That's just not, you don't want that. And one way that you would check for that is to look at the peer survey, and you have the results of that. And I've actually been a council member, and I never wanted to make a decision on a fee without looking at that kind of data, and that's why you have it. That said, there are just zillions of fees when you go across the whole city, and they're not all benchmarked here because some of them you do very little of. There's not much point in comparing an activity that you do once or twice a year. What do you really learn? Other cities don't necessarily title their fees the same way you title them, or they may title them the same way but not mean the same bundle of services, etc. In order to narrow this down to questions that we knew we'd get some cooperation from and we could manage meaningfully, we developed the peer survey that you see in front of you, which is every department's in it, and the most in-demand services in each office are on that list. But it's not technically possible, even in get 100 people and go at this for weeks. You're not going to get a match on what every city charges on everything. It's just not possible because of lack of consistency in how people charge for these things. Okay, what do we do next? You need to mull this over a little bit. You will have a chance now to ask me some questions about it. The departments working through the city manager will firm up their recommendations on what they think you should do, and it will come back to you for further discussion and decision. When you make a decision of what to do, the city is going to need some time to update price lists, including on the website, get the word out there, et cetera. They need some amount of time to get ready to tell the public the price used to be X, now it's not X anymore. I think that you are fine updating this annually by a change in some cost index, and I would recommend a change in your appropriation. If your appropriation grows by, pick a number, 2% annually, to increase the prices by 2% annually. After 4 to 5 years, your use of technology, the laws that you enforce, the staff that you employ, et cetera, they've changed enough that I don't think you could continue to adjust this based on changes in appropriation. But from one year to the next, right after a cost study, I'd be comfortable saying next year's fees should change by the change in your appropriation. I think that's a cost-based index. So with that said, those are my formal remarks, and we can now move to questions or whatever free-form discussion you would like to have about user fees and user fee policy.
Alderwoman Painter?
Yes, in Public Works, did you look at garbage fees as well?
We did. You have the list in front of you for that, and we did not look at garbage fees. And I actually had not much to do with selecting the fees for the study, but if you go to the last page of the handout, you'll see what we did cover, and there are some dumpster permits, but not garbage per se, and I understand that's a topic of current interest.
Yes.
And so I think I know why you asked.
If I might just add, that was one of the excluded items, as well as stormwater, sanitary sewer fees, because of all the other work we had done on that topic.
But good question. Timely.
Alderwoman Schmidt, and then Burgess and Sage.
Just a clarification on a couple of these, and I think City Clerk Fee Services is one. You have a box on your table that says Office Recommends?
Yes.
What is that?
We
Is that
asked,
your office, their office?
that's the city clerk's office.
I see. Okay.
We asked everybody for recommendations. Some have made them as of now, some have not. I put in their recommendations as you have them. I'm not sure that you can consciously make a profit, but I want to put that in front of you for serious consideration, that uh, there are cases where you're doing a really good job of recovering costs and cases where you're not doing a great job of recovering costs. And so a salute to the city clerk's office for being a supporter of the city being made whole on fees. In fact, they're recommending a little more than that. I don't know that you can do more than that, but so be it. If I can go back to this sheet that you have, you look at the over-under and the percentages there. I don't think anybody could really say that that looked like a conscious expression of policy of how much cost to recover. I think this is an example of incrementally, one decision at a time, the city finds itself in this position and now has an opportunity to review whether the way you charge is the way you want to charge.
A follow-up, different question. We're having some conversations now about our liquor fees.
Yes.
And so I was interested to see that ours is 150% of our peer average. So when you see fees as low as $50 and as high as $650, are there are the rationales behind those fees that different from one community to another? Are there different situations at play?
I don't think so. I think it's simply happenstance. I had a client a few years ago, it was a county, and the county asked me, now that we have legal authority to set some prices based on a cost study, do you happen to know how long our fees have been at this price level? I didn't know, so we went down to the county's law library. We found the oldest Illinois statutes book we could. It was from 1927. And the prices in 1927 are the same ones that are on the books today. So in terms of anybody really paying attention to this and coming up with a policy of when we charge a fee, how much a cost do we want to recover, I don't detect conscious design in any of this as much as one activity at a time. We add to the ordinance a new fee and a new price, and it can just kind of linger out there for a long time until you look at it. And kudos to the city for taking a look at this. I mean, you actually are ahead of the game at this point because you know more than these other cities do about what it costs you to do these things.
Alderwoman Burgess, Sage, and Lauer.
So I want to follow up on that. This is the liquor application fee. Is that the same as a liquor license? And this might be a question for David.
I've seen them different in many establishments. You do have one fee just for the application process, and then a separate for the license. Because as you know, once you go through the application process, you don't repeat that every year. It's just a simple renewal. Hence, that's why many cities have had a fee for each one, the application, and then a separate one for the annual fee.
How do we do it?
I'm not sure. Cherry, can you?
I believe it's just the application that we charge for. And so we've looked at that in our office.
But we do have the liquor license fees each quarter on top of that.
On top of.
Right.
Okay, good clarification.
And typically, and I don't mean to express it specifically here, but in general in Illinois, the price of a liquor license depends on what kind of license it is. Is it beer and wine only? Is it a private club? Is it is it a bar? And the prices vary for those things.
And ours are pretty similar. That's some of what we're revisiting.
So I think it's safe to say in the conversation about liquor license fees, this particular study may not be capturing the entire story.
I think that's fair to say. This is a piece of it. There are, and this is a good question. This comes up a lot where people say, well, what about law enforcement's cost to make sure that they're not selling to minors? What about drunk drivers? What economists call externalities. All these things are kind of outside of the transaction. How much of that should we include? Well, that's a good question. I wouldn't claim to know any more about it than anybody else, but I've never seen a state that wrote rules over when we define this fee, where are the boundaries for what we're charging for and what we're not charging for with this. And that's one reason that these comparisons to other cities are so tricky, because everybody's definitions are whatever they are.
And I just wanted to ask one quick question about the scope of the work that you performed. Am I correct that you were asked to look at services that we already charge fees for and to evaluate those particular services and fees, and that you were not looking for additional areas to add fees?
Largely true. There were a few exceptions where people said, I would like to have a new fee for X or Y. Could you, as long as you're under the hood, could you look at it? One issue that often comes up is whether other cities might have charges that would present opportunities. The difficulty with that, I'll give you an example for this, in the building permit world, where some people charge a building permit fee and others charge separately for the building permit and the plumbing, electrical, and mechanical, and the fence permit, and the deck on the house, and a driveway permit. And so if you look at the lists of fees, in some places, it looks like they charge for so many different things, but another city may just have a fee that wraps around all that. So and how do you even compare that then? Some of this amounts to art and some of it's science. That part is clearly art.
Alderman Sage and then Lauer.
Thank you. And thanks for sharing your results with us. Just a couple of general questions. On the results page or some of the next steps page, you mentioned the council decides what to enact. Do you see generally in other communities, does a local governance board, do they set prices, or do they set a policy of saying we want to subsidize at this level?
More the latter. More the latter. There will be a few exceptions where, this is the price you want and charge that. But for the most part, the way I'm used to seeing it work is there's some kind of guidance over, we neglected these, let's boost them up some percentage, and then ask the departments to come back with recommendations. And one reason for that is there may be cases where demand is really discretionary, and increasing the price beyond a certain level would perversely actually reduce your revenue.
Mm-hmm.
We need to care a little bit about things like, again, in the building world, if somebody has a $500 do-it-yourself project and is told that the permit fee will be $500 as well, and it's kind of what a lot of people would do faced with that is just do the work without a permit, and then you have unsafe structures. So I can't just salute the cost that we determine and say that would be a good policy, and that's one reason, and David Hales and I discussed this, one reason we have this note here underneath summary of findings. You need to tread carefully here. For the most part, I think some fee increases are due, and they're justified by the numbers, and I don't think life on Earth as we know it will cease if some prices go up. But I can't just globally tell you how much they should go up. I think that the process we have in place here is staff will come back to you with some specific recommendations, and you will have the chance to decide whether those feel right.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we're going to have to go on. Anything else?
And then also, sorry, Mayor, I forgot my question. Maybe if you could go with Kevin and bounce back.
Okay, yeah, and we're going to have to wind this up.
I'm
Yeah.
just going to be real short and right to the point here. It seems to me that we would be concerned about recovering our direct costs outside of externals. I don't think that there's a lot of science to this. It's pretty simple to me. I mean, obviously, since 1927, we've had a high level of automation, and a lot of this is cookie cutter. One liquor fee to the next, yes, there's probably differences in terms of how each establishment might handle themselves, et cetera. But one builder to the next, I wouldn't think that there'd be a lot of differences. And so I think it's very important for us from a small business standpoint to keep very clearly in mind that there's barriers to entry, and folks will not come to our city and engage in business if our fees are too high. And that's very poignant to me. So just my comment, just my observation. If I'm wrong, maybe I'm wrong. But
I think this is an expression of values, and I won't disagree with it. I think as Americans, we like to govern with a light hand and be sensitive to that. One of the questions I would be asking is, what is the fee as a percentage of the total project? And I would not think it made good policy to charge a $500 permit fee for something that costs the applicant $500 to do. That doesn't sound right. It might be mathematically right, but I don't think it sounds like good policy. But I don't think you're recovering your direct costs here. I think if your policy is to recover direct costs, I think there is room in here, since these haven't been increased frequently, that maybe it's time to do this. I would also encourage you to think of fee increases. This is going to take something on your part, so bear with me on this. Fee increases are a form of tax relief. People can ask your staff to do a number of things, and if taxes, which are limited, legally limited, can't cover the cost of what people want, either we can raise the fee prices, or we can tell people, you're just going to have to wait longer because we can't get around to it as fast as. So I would say, to the extent that fees are a purchase of service, consider what you might want to do with the price in the context of the overall value of the transaction to the applicant. If your fee is equal to the transaction cost, it's probably not going to fly. If it's a small percentage of the total transaction, that might actually not distort behavior. That might not change.
Okay.
If a permit fee is less than 1% of the cost of the total project, even if that permit fee goes up a bunch, it's not really going to change your decision about what to do.
Okay.
But your sensitivity about that is going to be essential for the council to make good decisions. I applaud you for that. I think that's really an important.
Thank you very much.
important point.
We're way over time here, and we got another meeting that was supposed to start about 6 minutes ago. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Anyway, thank you. Very, very informative. At this point, is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Alderwoman Schmidt. Is there a second? Second by Alderwoman Hamm. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. We're adjourned, and we will be meeting over in the fishbowl shortly.